The U.S. economy has come roaring back from pandemic lows, but a disappointing jobs report on Friday that fell far short of analyst predictions highlighted some potentially worrying trends. One of those is that with 8 million unfilled jobs, there's potentially a mismatch between available jobs and the skills of workers. And some workers appear simply reluctant to return. Here's a little bit of what President Joe Biden said today about those unfilled jobs.
We're going to make it clear that anyone collecting unemployment who is offered a suitable job must take the job or lose their unemployment benefits.
And joining us now to give their take on the economy and the pandemic's impacts on the workplace are Rebecca Ryan, economist and futurist and the founder of Next Generation Consulting, and Tom Gimbel, founder and CEO of LaSalle Network. That's a nationwide staffing, recruiting, and culture consulting firm based here in Chicago. Welcome back, both of you, to Chicago Tonight. Rebecca, I'll start with you. As an economist, you see these sort of varying sets of data. How would you characterize this job market right now, and what are your expectations?
Well, the most recent report was certainly disappointing, and I think there are two things going on. One is that there were structural problems with our job market before the pandemic, so we've got a huge middle skills gap, and that persists. But the second issue is this notion of people not being in a hurry to return to work, and I certainly think that wages can be part of the problem, but that's a very narrow slice. The other piece are whether workers feel safe going back to work, physically safe regarding COVID, and whether they're also thinking about switching careers. I think for some of these essential and key workers, this pandemic has raised some big questions about the kinds of work they want to be doing in the future.
So there's some headwinds here, but despite that, Tom Gimbel, you've said that this is the best job market you've seen in 25 years. At least there are jobs out there if there are people willing and skilled to be able to do them. So what counts here for the discrepancy?
There's a job out there for anybody who wants one. And while I agree with Rebecca on several of her points, it's not up for the government to support people while they're looking to do a career change on the unemployment side. So I agree that people may be looking for that, but that's not for the government, i.e. the taxpayer, to be supporting. What we're seeing right now is exactly what Rebecca said, and that is a huge skills gap, especially in the technology sector, healthcare, supply chain, where we just don't have people who have those skills. And I'm not sure that it's people who are afraid to come back to work. I think it's that cities haven't necessarily opened up fully. And when we see New York and Chicago opening up and other cities this summer, and then all the hospitality, the service workers, the restaurant folks can be back working, we'll see these numbers increase. And then we also have a full set of college students graduating in May, and we'll start to see that in the June and July numbers that really reflect what this economy is capable of from an employment area of specialization.
So Rebecca Ryan, at least for that unemployment benefit part of it, you heard the president allude to this. Would it make a difference if some of those added benefits went away and they tightened the reins on unemployment?
I think it will for some sectors of employees, but you know, we've all had a different experience during COVID, and there's not one, silver bullet that's going to solve this.
Tom Gimbel, I did a report earlier alluding to a study from the design firm Gensler that said that they expect 70% of folks to go back to the workplace, at least for most of the week. Does that square with what you've been seeing?
Absolutely. We are going to see a new normal, which is a hybrid workforce. But whether a lot of people are thinking that'll be when the employee wants to, and I'm not hearing that or seeing that from the HR leaders and CEOs that I meet with. What we are hearing is that people are going to be coming back on a design plan somewhere between 3 and 4 days a week for the majority of companies, which would be 60 to 80%, which hits right in line with what Gensler's saying in their report. And I think people are going to still use a very similar size footprint because they want to have their people in the office at the same time.
Rebecca Ryan, what does that portend for the economy at large if that's what materializes? Folks in the office maybe 3-4 days a week, maybe remote 2-3 days a week?
I think there are two things we can point to longer term. One is an increase in productivity. We've made the case in COVID that we can keep and in some cases improve productivity even when people are not working in an office. So that's one of the benefits. But the other one is this: employers save on average $11,000 per employee when they allow workers to have the hybrid schedule that Tom mentioned, at least a couple days a week. So we're going to get productivity gains, but we're also going to get profitability gains longer term.
So all positive signs you point to there. Tom Gimbel, in the pandemic here, we've seen 2 million women and 1.5 million men dropping out of the labor force. How did the pandemic specifically affect the ability of women to be in the workforce?
I think it really shows the gender discrimination, quite frankly, that exists in the home. When women were dropping out of the workforce more than men, it probably shows that they take on the majority of the parenting duties. And that is something that we have to talk about as a society that's not as popular to talk about, that it really should be a shared responsibility. Simultaneously, though, it does show that more service jobs, i.e. restaurants, are held by women, and we need to make sure that they have an alternative to do if, in fact, being in a restaurant isn't possible anymore. And that's why we're seeing so many customer service jobs, what's now called customer success and technology jobs, help desk jobs where people can learn and grow in those areas, entry-level accounting. And it's time for people who want to work to be able to work in an office and make that transition. And that's what we're trying to do.
Rebecca Ryan, how about that? What are ways to sort of close this gender gap that we're seeing now between men and women in the workforce?
Well, I think Tom's right about the childcare burden falling primarily to the women. But there are other care concerns as well, right? We've got elderly parents. People are living longer than they ever have. So we've got that crunch. So it's the care crunch, right, overall. And I think this raises the specter of a few things. Private sector employers are very innovative. So if they want to bring more women back to work, I think you can expect on-site childcare in some cases, possibly daycare stipends to help with some of those requirements. And overall, most communities, most of the major metropolitan areas have had a daycare shortage generally. So what we've got here is an opportunity for either fast tracking some of those childcare and daycare providers to ease some of the restrictions, increase the compensation that people can make in those fields, or maybe policy changes.
A lot of work-life improvements, though, might come out of this pandemic. Tom Gimbel, I want to get back to this whole gap between the jobs that are available out there and people with the skills and the wherewithal to do them. You see immigration obviously is a sore subject for both parties. There's not a lot of progress on that. So what are the solutions here to closing that gap a little bit?
Well, we've got to make a bigger push on learning and development, and that is across the board, where companies that are really profitable and have a gap, especially at entry-level jobs, where they can train people to come on in and implementing better onboarding and training programs for people. Secondarily is utilizing the community college programs that we have across this country that are really built for training and learning new skills, especially in software, accounting, IT, things along those lines. There is opportunity. The challenge that we face is that we just live in a time where people expect and are feeling entitled to get something. And 20 years, 30 years, 50 years ago, people did whatever they had to do to get their foot in the door. And we've lost that, where everybody's one degree away from somebody who's made $1 million on the internet and creating an app, and they don't want to put in the hard work. And a lot of times that's what it takes to gain an opportunity and to make a transition into a new career.
I should bookend that by saying I started here at WTTW 16 years ago as an intern. So it can pay off to be patient and to get in at the ground level. All right, interesting few months ahead for both of you. Our thanks to Rebecca Ryan and Tom Gimbel for joining us.
Thanks, Paris.
Thank you.